IMF Today is live in Marrakesh, where there's been a lot of talk about the challenges facing the global community.
We are experiencing severe shocks that are now becoming the new normal. Today, we simply don't have the growth that we need to heal from the impact of the shocks and provide opportunities to people so they can see standard of living going up. And investing in people prepares them for the job opportunities for tomorrow.
Growth in many economies in the Middle East and Central Asia is slowing. And importantly, growth is not forecast to be strong or inclusive enough to create the needed jobs for the 100 million Arab youth who will reach working age over the next 10 years.
Everybody knows what needs to be done, they just don't know how to do it and get re-elected again.
I'm unwavering optimist. We define our destiny.
Hello and welcome to IMF Today. I'm Amanda Walker. It's Thursday and we're in the deep policy discussion stage here at the IMF and World Bank Group annual meetings. It all started today with IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva delivering her global policy agenda. We also had the first of our regional economic outlooks, this one for the Middle East and Central Asia. AI in Africa and central bank digital currencies were hot topics of some of today's new economy sessions. And our seminar series really hit high gear with 3 on the schedule. First, Deputy Managing Director Geeta Gopinath led one on domestic resource mobilisation, and Deputy Managing Director Antoinette Saye joined a panel on reviving growth in emerging market and developing economies. And the Managing Director took part in a panel discussing one of the most important issues facing the global community: debt burdens in low-income and emerging economies. It was a theme the MD also touched on during her own press conference this morning.
Low-income economies have been hardest hit because they have had extremely limited buffers to begin with. So it was hardest for them to protect their economy, to protect their people. During these meetings, we aim to put solidarity in action by increasing our capacity to support our low-income members. We believe it is important also at these meetings to demonstrate we are capable to expand the voice of emerging markets and developing countries at the fund. There is a lot to do to achieve it.
The Managing Director was also asked about the developing situation in the Middle East and the potential impacts in the region.
It's heartbreaking to see innocent civilians dying. An attack from one place on another, causing also reciprocity in response. Who pays the price? It is the innocent who pay the price. In terms of economic impact, we are very closely monitoring how the situation evolves, how it is affecting especially oil markets. It is too early to say. We have seen some up and down of oil prices. We have seen some reaction on markets. And as I said, we will be closely monitoring this. Very, very clearly, this is a new cloud on not the sunniest horizon for the world economy. New cloud darkening this horizon, who, of course, not need it. Pray for peace.
Emerging markets and developing countries face a perfect storm of challenges. A slow global recovery leads to tight budgets, while rising debt levels and higher interest rates make it harder for policymakers to ignite growth. It's an urgent problem, as many of these countries are still reeling from the effects of the pandemic and the food price shock. Joining me now to discuss these issues is IMF Deputy Managing Director Antoinette Saye. Thank you so much for joining us on IMF Today. So we've got all these policymakers here, many of whom we can see milling around us at the moment. They're all in one place. What do you think they should agree to do to boost growth amidst all these challenges we've been talking about all week?
They are indeed confronted by mammoth challenges, and it underscores the need, we think, to renew a focus on structural first-generation reforms, as we call it. And those are reforms that really address the most binding constraints on growth and helps countries navigate the tensions between conflicting policy pressures and macro pressures as well. So what are some of those reforms? Governance reforms, reforms that address the regulatory environment so that people can actually establish businesses more easily and run them more easily. And also external sector reforms so that trade restrictions are reduced and access to foreign capital is made easier. And those reforms, especially in countries that have not navigated them before successfully, can really boost growth and can really enable them to then take on further challenges down the road. Our research shows that depending on how well they are prioritized, sequenced, and combined, they can really make a difference in say, a two-year period in one of these countries that has not yet seen much progress, to actually make 2% more growth, 4% growth actually in a two-year time frame,
right,
and as high as 8% in just 4 years. So quite a boost from actually putting in place those initial reforms. In a context of very constrained and policy space with macro pressures as we're seeing today, those reforms can actually help to reduce those pressures. So in enabling a more open environment for private activity, in restoring confidence, getting reduced levels of premia on sovereign debt can result. And more confidence in governments can also reduce some of those macro pressures that then make it possible for governments to take the time they need to adjust and to move on to continuing to implement their reform efforts.
It's a daunting prospect, isn't it, though, for so many of these developing countries, emerging markets. They've got tight budgets, they've got debt, they've got to think about climate change. Is it possible to take on all of that at once?
It is. It's a question of sequencing them properly and making sure that one prioritizes and front loads those reforms that have the biggest impact on growth initially, so that political space is made for then pursuing more ambitious reforms. People see the results of reforms in the growth that is resulting from them in short order, and can then have some confidence that pursuit of those reforms would make a difference. So it's very important to sequence and to make sure that one addresses those with the biggest bang. Yeah.
And you mentioned the word confidence, how much focus is on actually giving these countries exactly that in dealing with these really difficult times where they are very often bearing the brunt.
Yeah, confidence is it grows with demonstration of actually putting in place those things you say you're going to put in place, And so it's a question of taking action on those issues that are clearly of significant importance to private investors and that they want to see some action on. Yeah.
And a good setting for doing that. What does it mean for you to be here out of the United States for the first time in a good few years and in person on this amazing campus?
Well, it's not my first time being out of the United States for a long time, but it is our first opportunity to bring all of our membership together outside of Washington. And clearly, it always makes a difference when you're in the environment that we talk and discuss a lot about. And this particular country, of course, is a very promising one that has robustly pursued reforms over a period of years, that has worked very hard to navigate the many challenges that it faces, including the most recent shock of the devastating earthquake. And the resilience that they've shown is truly impressive.
Yeah. Antoinette Say, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on IMF Today. Now, institutions need to be agile to meet the demands of the new world, but policymakers also need to facilitate growth enhancement reforms and global cooperation. A seminar late yesterday focused on how to finance resilience, particularly for low-income countries. IMF Deputy Managing Director Kenji Okamura spoke about the IMF's efforts to help.
So we are doing everything we can to secure adequate resources. Adequate resources to support low-income countries. Then I have a good news to share with you. We have heard earlier today during the high-level event on PLGT that we have made significant progress toward our $3 billion target for PLGT subsidy resources, including major contributions from Japan and Qatar. And I would particularly like to thank the large and diverse group of contributors like Botswana and Mauritius.
Okay.
So this, I think it's a good manifestation, testament of solidarity. So making these fundraising efforts a success. So, but there is more work to do, and the need of leaks remain vast. So I would say the need for international cooperation. The need for international cooperation has never been greater. So, in the spirit of solidarity, we must continue to work together to help the low-income countries to ensure our most vulnerable countries do not have to face their challenges alone.
Joining me now to talk about staying agile in a changing world is Masood Ahmed, President of the Centre for Global Development. Masood, thank you for joining us on IMF Today. So we're hearing so much about the challenges, these global, big, unprecedented challenges that everybody has been facing. So how would you say countries can build sustainable economies when there is so much to working against countries?
Well, look, I would say for countries right now, the first way to do that is to just recognize what you've just said, that we are going to be in a world where there are going to be more shocks, more frequent. They'll get hit often when they don't know that it's coming, and therefore they've got to build the space into their system to be able to react financially. That's easier said than done. If you're a very poor country, you're struggling to just make payment on the bills that are coming due rather than put something aside for a hard day that might come. But it just becomes much more important to do that. And secondly, you need systems which allow you to make decisions more quickly. And if you go back to COVID, it was the countries that were able to make the good decisions quicker that just ended up paying less in terms of a cost. So decision-making processes need to change. Final thing I'd say is, it's not just the countries, it's the institutions that are supposed to be helping them that also need to factor that into what they do and how they operate.
Yeah, we'll talk more about those institutions in just a minute, but I'm interested in this idea. It's basically brace yourselves, it's resilience. How do you build resilience?
Well, as I said, first thing is you've got to put some money aside, because the one thing you do need when you're hit is a little bit of space financially to be able to put in a response. Second, I do think you build resilience by putting in the systems and testing them that you will use when you get hit. If you've got a digital infrastructure to reach your population, to be able to give them quick, even small amounts of money when they need it, that helps you a lot when you've got it set up beforehand, than if you try and scramble and put it together when you've just been hit by a crisis. So I would just say, do stress tests. Prepare for that moment that's going to come and hit you. It will come and hit you.
And we've heard the word fragmentation a lot as well. How important is it for everyone to work together when, you know, everyone is facing their own unique challenges as well? The power of coming together, important?
Well, of course, there are some challenges that we can only solve if we come together, right? I mean, you can't solve the climate problem unless we bring at least the big players together. You can't solve pandemic surveillance unless you're surveying the pandemic problems as they emerge everywhere. But there are other problems, and I think it's important that we recognize this. In some places and on some issues, you can't solve the problem without cooperation. For other issues, it would be nice to have cooperation. It makes it easier to solve the problem, but you can do a lot without. And I think one of the things we have to recognize is we're going to have geopolitical tension, we have big power rivalry. In that context, let's focus on cooperation where we must, rather than cooperation wherever we can.
Masood Ahmed, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
So many challenges are facing the global economy right now. Some of them have countries debating how to boost growth with their domestic resources, and then how do they pay for it? It was the topic of a seminar today featuring the IMF First Deputy Managing Director, Geeta Gopinath.
I do think that the moment has come when you really need a concerted effort on domestic revenue mobilization. Now, there are many ways to do it. I'm going to give you some examples. So the numbers that we have, for instance, if you recall at the beginning, I told you emerging market and developing countries will need about an additional $3 trillion a year by 2030 to meet all their additional spending needs, right? The additional to close sustainable development goals, the climate transition. That $3 trillion, if you actually do the numbers in terms of what if we take emerging markets and developing countries and you say, let's try to raise revenues without changing their institutions in any dramatic way or changing the economic structures in dramatic ways, you can get a long way to that $3 trillion number by doing that. More than taxes, anything you can do, of course, structural reforms that raise productivity, and this is what the point Christian made, and if you can raise productivity, that's spending that pays for itself. Early childhood education, childcare, all of that helps pay for itself. And so prioritizing your spending so that it goes to areas that raise productivity and growth would be very effective.
Jason Furman also sat on that panel. He's a professor of practice of economic policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. He also served as chair of the US Council of Economic Advisors and was President Obama's chief economist. He joins us now. So, Jason, tell me, why is mobilizing domestic resources so important right now?
We have some big challenges. Some of those challenges are growth. There are also things like climate change, national security, poverty alleviation, and you can't do that without more resources.
And what policy measures do you think should be considered, particularly in developing countries and emerging markets?
Right. Well, in developing countries and emerging markets, you can't afford to do what the United States did, and I'm not even sure the United States can afford it, which is to just plow ahead with the investments without quite figuring out how you're going to pay for them. So you need to do two things. You need to make these investments in greening your economy and digitalization and innovation and whatever it is you're doing, but you also need to pay for it. Now, a lot of these countries have a lot of problems with the way they collect taxes. Improving on that is one of the most efficient ways to help pay for these types of investments.
And we know we're dealing with slow growth. What do you think the key challenges are facing the global economy at the moment?
Look, the Russian invasion of Ukraine continues to cast a shadow over the entire global economy, over commodities prices, over everything. When I look purely within the economic domain, we now have another set of risks around what is going on in the Middle East. So far, not a huge impact on the economy, but has raised uncertainty. Beyond that, when you have countries battling inflation, that's a difficult thing to balance with strong short-run growth. In many cases, they're not trying to have strong short-term growth.
And during that seminar, Geeta Gopinath said that she was worried about something by the fact that you are worried about something, which is the fiscal deficit in the US. What needs to happen?
Yeah, I think Geeta is basically saying that even Jason Furman thinks the deficit is a worry. We have a very large adjustment that needs to be made in the United States to bring us back to any semblance of fiscal sustainability. I think revenues need to be at the heart of that. The United States collects a lot less revenues relative to its economy than almost all the other advanced economies. Spending cuts need to be a part of it too. Solving the problem economically is simple. Solving it politically is beyond my ability.
We have heard, as we were saying in the previous interview as well, so many words keep coming up. One of them is fragmentation. How do we get countries to work together?
You know, I just like to step back and say we've been in this era of hyperglobalization, and what has it done? The most amazing thing for humankind economically in the hundreds of thousands of years that humans have walked this planet. It's been amazing. Now, it has a set of downsides, it has a set of challenges. I think we should be mindful of those and try to treat them. But I think we should be, to some degree, unapologetic and proud of everything that it has done for countries around the world, including, by the way, the advanced economies.
Okay, Jason Furman, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, here in Morocco in 2011, King Mohammed VI added to Morocco's constitution the right to a healthy environment and sustainable development. It's one of the first countries to integrate sustainable development goals in its social and economic development policies. And a lot of that plan relies on a successful energy transition, utilising renewable energies.
Right now, Morocco leads the African continent and Arab countries in the Renewable Energy Attractiveness Index. It's ranked 16th worldwide. By 2030, Morocco wants to have more than 52% of its installed electricity capacity fueled by renewable sources. That would be an increase of more than 6,000 megawatts from mainly solar, wind and hydroelectric projects. Morocco is also aiming to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 45.5% by 2030. The overall energy strategy targets 5 sectors: transportation, construction, industry, agriculture and public lighting. It calls for all state-funded projects to implement energy efficiency, for all new investments to consider the foundations, and for efforts to raise the population's awareness overall. There's also a push to develop the financial and institutional capacities of energy efficiency programs.
So much of the week has focused on climate change and what individual countries are doing to tackle it. As one of the most affected in North Africa, Morocco is working hard to adapt and mitigate the effects. Leila Benali is Morocco's Minister of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development. Earlier, she told me more about how they're doing it.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for the invitation, and thanks for IMF for actually bringing 15,000 people here in these annual meetings. And it's a great opportunity, of course, to talk about Morocco and other countries' move towards climate, because I think there's an increasing awareness that climate is one of the triple planetary crises and challenges that humanity has to face in the 21st century. So of course, Morocco being that ambitious player in the renewable field, we started under the enlightened leadership of His Majesty the King back in 2009 in our energy strategy to push for more renewables and more energy integration and energy efficiency, and of course also regional integration, because we cannot do it alone. I think today we are in that momentum and that shift where we have to scale investments in the renewable energies, in the grids as well, in storage to enable flexibility, security and affordability of energy. We are multiplying our investments by 2, 3 and 4 when it comes to the grid. So today, just to give you some numbers, we have 11 gigawatts of installed capacity in Morocco. Roughly half of it is renewable energy. We need to install equivalent 11 gigawatts between now and 2030. 8 gigawatts of that will be solar and wind. 3 gigawatts will be thermal to enable flexibility in the system. That will require additional investments, of course, in renewables, like $8 billion that we need to inject in the renewable energy value chain, but also investments in the grids and storage to enable flexibility and connectivity with the Mediterranean markets, with the African markets and the Atlantic basin. So all that gives you an idea of the amount of investment that we need to accelerate. So that's why I'm saying that we are multiplying basically our pace of annual investments in the energy sector and energy transition sector by 5.
Right, and you've recently been approved for the Resilience and Sustainability Trust from the IMF. How much of a difference is that going to make?
I think the Resilience and Sustainability Fund gives us flexibility also in the way we provide security also for the private sector, because one of the things that the private sector seems to be praising in these beautiful IMF World Bank annual meetings is the visibility and the certainty that Morocco provides over the medium and long term to be able to craft new type of business models and innovating financing schemes to accompany us in this transition. And we cannot do that if we feel uncomfortable with our financial and fiscal stability. So it's very important to have the luxury of being able to do that, but also the luxury of time, because we have to deploy those innovative business models and innovative financing schemes very fast. When I was talking about the fact that we need to inject, in a business as usual case, $1 billion of investments every year, it's starting today in 2030. I cannot wait to 2050 to do that.
Right, and I'm interested in your feeling as you are here in Marrakesh and you're interacting with all of these different countries. Everybody has climate on their mind. Do you feel now that we've reached the point where it's no longer about choice, it's about necessity, and that countries know that now?
I think there is an increasing awareness of climate is affecting everyone. It's affecting some countries more disproportionately than others, indeed. The African continent being disproportionately affected. Some countries in South America, the small islands as well, are also disproportionately affected. Mind you, Morocco, as a chairman of the United Nations Assembly for the Environment until March, we are increasing awareness of the fact that 25% of the UN membership might disappear before the end of the century because of climate. So that raises some questions that humanity has never been faced with in its history, and we need to provide answers that we were not equipped to provide in the past. So that's why today, in this vibrant gatherings, I think there is an increasing awareness that, of course, climate is important, but also you cannot cater to sustainability before catering to affordability and security.
Okay, Minister Ben Ali, I know you have a very busy schedule, so thank you for joining us on IMF Today.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
Some of the biggest business of the meetings takes centre stage tomorrow. The annual meetings plenary starts the day at 8:45 a.m. with a speech from the Finance Minister of Ukraine. Then we have the rest of the regional economic outlooks throughout the day. The Managing Director will join a panel of blockbuster guests for one of the signature events of the annual meetings, the debate on the global economy. You won't want to miss this seminar at 2 p.m. And then there's the IMFC. It holds its introductory session where the IMF's top economic minds present their latest findings on the global economy and developments to IMF governors. Now, before we go, we just want to give you a little sense of this amazing campus. Just 5 months ago, it was an empty plot of dry, dusty land, and it's just incredible walking around now and seeing how it's all come together. So there's a path next to our studio that's become sort of a media village. Camera crews are setting up all along the route, reporting the headlines from these meetings to countries around the world. So at any given time when you're walking around, you're probably walking past one of the dozens of international news organisations bringing the headlines and stories from these meetings to their viewers back home. And that's what we hope we're doing with you here on IMF Today. Thank you for joining us as we broadcast you again live from Marrakesh. And for those of you IMF staff watching back at HQ in DC or online, stay with us for some exclusive content just for you. For everyone else, we'll see you back here tomorrow at 5 p.m. local time.